Hi, it's Mitch from Pickdawgz.com, and today we're going to talk about the teams that made us money betting on them in the 2022 baseball season. With 2023 ready to kick off here in MLB action, of course, we need a refresher course as to where we left off. You know, betting strategy in baseball is something that I talk about often on our live shows. I talk about it in our videos, and often when I'm making my picks in the videos, a lot of them are based on value. And I think when we look at the teams that made money last season, I think you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about value. A lot of people feel betting on the same team over and over again is a good idea. The reality of it is only 9 teams turned a profit if you bet $10 on them on the money line every single game last season. A lot of the big market teams, the teams that are considered the best teams, a lot of times on those teams, you need to pay very, very big odds every time they step onto the field. That means you take one loss and you could lose 2 to 3 winners for every loss that you have. That means you have to win 120 games just to break even. 0 teams won 120 games last season, so that is a tough way to make a living. And I think as you see the way our list shapes up and you see how these teams got there, I think it's going to make a lot more sense to you. I think you're going to be surprised by some teams that are on the list. I think you're going to be surprised by some teams that aren't on the list. But let's get started. We'll go down the list and we'll dig into some of these things. Of course, any questions, any comments, just put those in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. This isn't the only Major League Baseball betting video we're going to do. And so I think I'm going to do it on the teams that lost the most money last year as well, because I find this topic just fascinating and something I refer to often all season long. But anyways, let's get to this one and let's just show you the chart of how these teams got there. First up, the Atlanta Braves. This team is a perennial winner, a team that we consider a playoff team every single season. But the thing about the Atlanta Braves, if you bet $10 on every single game they played last season, including the postseason, you made a grand total of 10 cents. Now, we know there's variation in sports books and lines and prices, and that's why you always got to shop the lines, and that's why we have the sportsbook offers over at Pickdawgz.com and Sports Chat Place, and I encourage everybody to do that, especially in a sport like baseball, where it seems like it's pennies per game, but over the course of a season, oh boy, they add up in a hurry. And here's the Atlanta Braves, who started the season really losing a lot of money for their backers. The issue with the Braves in a team like this is you're always going to be laying big prices, and the Braves have the last few seasons have been loaded throughout the second half, and we saw that happen here. You know, with the Braves basically never turned profitable until after the trade deadline and really until the fall into September. And they got there, and even after they turned profitable, you can see that in between September and October, they still dipped below. And when all was said and done, after getting bounced from the playoffs, the Atlanta Braves turned a grand profit of 10 cents, which ranks them 9th best in all of Major League Baseball for teams that if you bet them every single game. Team number 8 in the rankings was the Philadelphia Phillies. Of course, the Phillies went to the World Series, but boy, it was a tough road to get there as they started the season absolutely horribly. The thing about the Phillies is they're loaded with big-name players, high-priced players like Bryce Harper, and the thing of when that happens, you need to pay a price every single time you bet on them. So every single loss, you get absolutely hammered, and when you make money on them, it is really just a fraction of some of those big losses that you have to take. You can see even through October, after turning a nice profit over the summer, the Phillies, well, they started to head south as far as the bankroll department goes. But they were able to recoup everything for their investors with a massive playoff run. And we remember that landed the Phillies in the World Series. You can see the end of that chart going straight down where they kind of were on the wrong end of it all against the Houston Astros, losing about a unit each time out. But outside of that, you know, the Phillies, it was a tough run. Certainly their backers had to gut out some tough times. But in the end, if you bet $10 on every Philadelphia Phillies game last season, you made $11.70. Don't spend it all in one place. Team number 7, another perennial playoff team. This one is the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals were active at the trade deadline, but as you can see, a little bit more consistent than the first two teams that we talked about. The Cardinals started the season fairly strong. They suffered some injuries, especially in their starting pitching rotation, which while they took some losses and you could see some losing streaks there around July, at the same time, we also got some good value on a lot of their players. And traditionally, the last few seasons, the Cardinals have gone on some amazing runs in the fall. And we see that here once again, that once they get through August and the trade deadline, this team was absolutely on fire, topping off that, if you got off at one point, you were making about 10-1 on your money. But when all was said and done, you bet $10 on the St. Louis Cardinals on every single game last season, you made $33.70, which not that bad considering, like I said, 7th best of all teams in Major League Baseball. So 23 other teams, you were on the wrong end of it when it came to comparing them to the St. Louis Cardinals. Pick number 6, we're going to go to another team considered a perennial winner, and that is the Los Angeles Dodgers. This is a team that in my videos throughout the year, a lot of people say you hate the Dodgers or you don't, or you never pick the Dodgers. I don't never pick the Dodgers. What I find is that the Dodgers have been a very poor value, and that's not because they don't win a lot of games. They've won a ton. In fact, I believe more than anybody else. But the thing about the Dodgers is at a lot of these games, we've had to pay gigantic prices in the -200. I've even seen them in the -400 range. That means for every loss that they take, you need 4 wins. And like I said at the beginning of this video, that would mean you would need 120 wins just to break even. And 120 wins isn't something we see from Major League Baseball teams. It is rare to never that happens. I believe it's happened just a few times over the course of the over 100 years that baseball has been played. We look at the Dodgers and we see, once again, they were back end loaded like some of these other teams, where after the trade deadline, after some of these other teams, kind of packed it in, that's when the Dodgers found their stride. And of course, they took an exit from the playoffs as well. And you could see that at the tail end of the season. That took away from their total. But if you bet $10 on the Dodgers every single game last season, you made $58. For team number 5, we go to a more interesting story here. And this one is the Seattle Mariners, who actually were plus money for a good portion of the season. They kind of tailed off a little bit, but in July, they started to make a move. Of course, around the trade deadline, they made some moves as well. And this team started to make a run late in the season that landed them in the postseason. The Luis Castillo trade, and of course, Castillo's performance throughout the playoffs. But like all playoff teams that we see in this, except for the team that won the World Series last year, at the end of their chart, you can see kind of a little bit of a line that goes straight down that took away from the entire bottom line. If you bet $10 on the Mariners every game last season, you made $83. That's 5th best in the major leagues. So that's really, that's how tight things are. And you can see, like I said, if you shop lines, it could be a little bit higher. It could be a little bit better even than these numbers that I'm saying. These are all based on one sports book. But if you're looking to shop lines, of course, sign up for multiple sports books. It costs you nothing to do so. You might have to spread your bankroll out a little bit, but you get bonuses along the way. We have all sorts of offers over at Pickdawgz.com under the Sportsbook tab. I also put a link in the description where you can shop those lines. But the Seattle Mariners made a nice run at the end of last season. You could see it, and it paid off for their backers. Team number 4 is a team that's big market, big payroll, and that's the New York Mets. And that's kind of not something that you generally see on these lists towards the top. But this year, it's a little bit mixed. And the Mets, they had a really, really nice run late in the season, in the summer. But of course, they fizzled out at the end of the year. And that was when they had the injuries that didn't let them get it done. The Mets are a big-time payroll team and a big, the number 1 TV market. So when you have teams that have that sort of stigma attached to them, Well, value is something that's going to be hard to find. So you need to win a lot of games if you're on a team like that. So I think, the moral of the story, and you see it here with the Mets, is you got to find the games where the value is and avoid those games where it's potentially, you could fall off a cliff. There were several games for the New York Mets where Jacob deGrom was listed as the starter. He maybe came in and pitched very little and then had to leave the game. We saw so many games throughout deGrom's career with the Mets where, he took leads late into the game as a very, very heavy favorite, only to see his bullpen blow the lead. Of course, Met fans and Mets backers at the window don't have to worry about that this season because deGrom is off to Texas as part of the Rangers. But you can see, if you bet the Mets every single game last season, if you bet $10 on them, the fourth best team in all of baseball, you made $87.80. Next up on our list is a team that always finishes in this list, and that is the Cleveland Guardians. You can see the massive jump in income from the 4 to the 3 spot. If you bet $10 on the Guardians, you made $173.60. This is the beauty of being a smaller market team. This is the beauty of having that young pitching staff and a lot of names that a lot of people aren't familiar with. And this is the beauty of a team that is traditionally a very good closer. The Cleveland Indians, if you look at this chart here, they were steady Eddie for the bulk of the season. They stayed above in the profitable range most of the time because you didn't have to pay very big odds on them on one side of it. And then on the other side, you got them as an underdog plenty of times as well. Of course, they hung in there, and then late in the season, they did what the Guardians always do, and that's make that late charge. And, of course, they seem to just grow those pitchers on trees in Cleveland, and Shane Bieber and company will be back in action again this year. But you can see team number 3, the Cleveland Guardians, $173 if you bet $10 on them every single game last season, and that's if you didn't even shop lines. We go to team number 2, and this is a rarity on this list, but this is the World Series champion Houston Astros on here. And you can see if you bet $10 on the Astros, you made $198. Now, the thing is that the Astros did not make it easy on their bettors. You don't see some of the massive spikes that you see for some of the other teams that we've shown on this list when you see to the upside movement. Yeah, a lot of those teams have a lot more downside movement than the Astros had, and you had to sweat it out a lot more than you did on the Astros. But with the Astros, these are very, very small moves because the Astros were big favorites in a lot of games last season. Like I say, number 2 best betting them overall in baseball. So even if you did have to pay up odds, it worked out in your favor if you backed the Houston Astros last season. The Astros, once again, have a really strong team. And, of course, as the World Series champs, they're the one team that made the postseason that has the chart that ends on that high note because they won, and they won in pretty convincing fashion once they got to the World Series. You can see a little bit of drop-off, a little bit of stumble, but you can see also October on, that is the Astros' time, and you can see that chart go from plus 100 to almost double that in just over a month span. Team number 2, the defending World Series champions, the Houston Astros. And the best betting team in all of baseball, which was the best betting team in all of sports over the past year, was the Baltimore Orioles. This is a team that had very low expectations. They had lost their starter, John Means, their number 1 starter, early in the season. And let's see if we can make this a drop bigger. And once losing Means, we found even more value on the Orioles. Bettors refused to buy in that the Orioles were a reasonably good team, that the Orioles could contend in the American League East. They were up against the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays. None of those teams do you see on this list of teams that actually made a profit last season. Also missing from here, perennial playoff team, Tampa Bay Rays, the Chicago Cubs, the San Diego Padres, who a lot of people believe have what it takes to go this season. None of those teams turned a profit betting on them every single game last season. The Milwaukee Brewers, a perennial playoff team, 22nd overall when it came to betting on them every single game. In fact, if you bet $10 on the Brewers every game last season, you lost $145 last year. But here are the Baltimore Orioles, a team that, this is the quintessential value team. This is a team that, not a lot of people had a lot of high expectations of and exceeded those expectations. So we got big payoffs on the Orioles even late in the season when they were winning, putting together some pretty nice winning streaks. Anyways, looking at this list, I always think it's interesting to do this. I bring it up pretty much all season long and talk about, which teams are turning a profit, which ones aren't. I do that on our live shows, and maybe I'll do more videos like this, maybe a monthly video saying or weekly, who made us the most money this week, something like that, if that's something you guys would be interested in. I love talking baseball betting strategy because while a lot of people don't bet baseball, and it's really not one of the most popular sports out there anymore, it is a lot of games, so it's a lot of action for those of us that like to bet. And the thing is that it's also one of those things that you don't have to win every single game. In fact, you don't even have to have a winning record to turn a profit. And you can see that with with some of these teams out there. If you find just like teams that are minus 200, you need to win 120 games. Teams that are plus 200, you only need to win 40 games just to break even. So 25% of the time is all you need to win to break even if you're betting plus 200s and better. Of course, they're plus 200 for a reason, so you have to pick your spots, and we're not going to always find those situations, but we're always going to look for the most value in baseball because that's how you make money. Anyways, this is Mitch. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I love talking this sort of stuff. We have all these kind of information on our betting tools over at sportschatplace.com. Just go to the betting tools, click on profitable teams. That's where all these charts and everything come from. Like I said, your best bet is to always shop the lines. I put a link in the description. Sign up for a sports book and sign up for as many as you can, because in baseball, while it seems like it's only a penny here and a penny there, there are a lot of games over the course of the season, and those pennies, they add up in a hurry, especially when you're betting $10, $20, $50, $100, or whatever you're betting on each game. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome Major League Baseball season. I'll see you guys in some more videos.